r/Nosleep. Posted by u/Mr_Mojo_Rising95. I started a new job as an overnight security guard at a private cemetery. The previous guard gave me list of rules which I can't comprehend. Chapter 2. I woke up that morning with the best sleep I've had in what felt like weeks. I looked at my alarm, letting out a loud stretching yawn. Couple more minutes in bed then I'll head out, I figured. When the time came, I gathered my things and headed out towards my car. It was going to be cloudy, foggy day according to the forecast. I brought an umbrella with me just in case. Making my way to the cemetery, the usual Cadillacs pathetically tried to remain tucked away. They weren't doing a great job. They could watch me all they want, it didn't bother me. I wasn't planning on sticking around here much longer anyway. With the money I've made, a new change of scenery was just what I needed. Hardest part now was lasting that long till I left. I needed to be smart these next few days. I pulled up along the hut. The pimply-faced teen stared out blankly into the cemetery. I approached him cautiously, even tapping on the glass to get his attention. Nothing. I walked towards the door. He had locked himself in. I banged on the door, jostled the handle, yet he didn't move, frozen like a statue. When I couldn't get a response from him, I warily made my way in front of him through the glass. He sat there wide-eyed, staring out into the cemetery, not blinking. His eyes were red and watery, pupils dilated. I waved and tried to get his attention, but to no avail. When I couldn't get a response, I looked around and noticed a few pebbles around the hut. I picked one up innocently and tossed it at the glass. What I heard was the most hell-raising scream I've heard from a person. The teen shot back to reality with ear-piercing screams like I had shot him. He looked horrified directly at me, his face contorting from his yells. He became hysterical, racing around the tiny hut knocking its contents over. I tried to help, but he burst through the door and raced down the windy narrow path out of the cemetery. That left me very unsettled, especially with how good my morning was going already. I got situated in the hut and read over the rules again. Any visitors to the cemetery must escorted to their grave. Do not ask any personal questions. Graves that appear to move must have oil poured over them. If the grave digger appears at any point, you must find an empty coffin and close yourself until he leaves. The nightwalkers will stalk you from dark areas around the cemetery, but pay no mind to them, but do not destroy any of their flowers. Lastly, if the grand mausoleum atop the hilltop door is open, try to survive until your shift is over. As the day trudged along, I prayed for no more visits from the grave digger. I don't think I could spend another second inside a coffin. I read over some things online, watched some videos trying to keep calm and cool. I read over the rules again and again, feeling more confident that I would be okay. The cloudy day turned into a full-blown blackout with thick rolling clouds blocking out the sun. The air pressure rose from within the cemetery and the smell of precipitation hung in the air. As the gloominess was settling over the land, I noticed a shape peeking out from behind the oak tree next to the porta-potty. A figure stood peering out from behind the tree. It had bright yellow eyes and gray steel-colored skin which looked rugged. I stared at it for what felt like an hour, watching it stand there silently. Watching me from beyond the tree. Had he always been there, I wondered to myself. I looked over the rules when number 4 caught my eye. The nightwalkers will stalk you from dark areas around the cemetery, but pay no mind to them, but do not destroy any of their flowers. Well, that's great, I thought, looking back towards the tree. But he was gone. I went back to my reading, but my eyes kept drifting up, waiting to see any of these so-called nightwalkers. When I picked my head up for the third time in 5 minutes, I noticed an oddly shaped circular gravestone protruding from the ground not too far from my car. I could have sworn that was not there originally, as I've never seen a circular tombstone before. I got the oil can ready and headed outside. A cool breeze was blowing as the rolls of gray clouds spilled across the sky. I headed towards the gravestone, which strangely had no markings on it and was cool to the touch. The other gravestones that appeared had always been warm, yet this one was almost icy. I hesitated, thinking this one may not be a random one. I cursed myself for not paying better attention, ultimately deciding to pour the oil over it. While I figured, what could wrong, I was faced with a much different reality. The oil poured over the gravestone, starting to melt it, which gave me some sense of relief. I continued watching when I heard what sounded like a stampede of people running out from within the cemetery. When I looked, the cemetery was quiet, trees and foliage rustling about in the wind. I returned back to the gravestone, which was now almost completely melted. Before I turned and went back inside the hut, a shape from within the oil caught my attention. As it continued melting, a flower began to take shape from inside the cracking gravestone. Confused, I looked down in horror as more of the flower revealed itself. The stampeding started back up again. The flower writhed about from within the oil, death overtaking it. It turned from lush green and white to sickly brown and black, twisting in pain as the oil bubbled around it. The stampede grew louder, the ground vibrating around me. I rushed towards the hut and was faced with the oncoming swarm of nightwalkers. They ran on all fours, mouths hanging agape with bright yellow eyes. Their elongated limbs sprawled apart as they raced for the hut. I went over the rules, not seeing any way to fight them. In a desperate attempt, as they closed in on me, I got in my car and peeled off down the dirt road. Maybe this early retirement was coming sooner rather than later. As I raced along the dirt path, I looked back in my rearview mirror and saw the horde in full force charging towards me. There must have been over 20 of them. Panic filled my body. Dirt crowded the air as they drew closer to me. Their gallops shocking the earth, sending waves of vibrations that shook my car. My heart was in my chest. I prayed I'd make it out in one piece. My mind flashed back to Robert's car and what came of him. With the iron gate in front of me, out of the cemetery in sight, I floored it, pushing my car to the limit. Looking behind me one last time, I saw the horde stopped in its path, staring at something. When I turned back around, the woman with long flowing red hair stood smugly in the gate's entrance. I slammed on the brakes, sending screeches resonating through the air, and the car struggled to stay on course. My car spun out of control, flipping over before smashing into the iron perimeter face. I awoke in the mangled car covered in broken glass and the airbag deployed. My ears rang and my nostrils were stung with heavy smoke. I was upside down, trying to get my seatbelt undone. Deep gashes were up along my arms, blood was trickling down into my eyes, blocking my vision. Before I lost consciousness, the woman in red bent down looking inside the car, shaking her head disapprovingly before the world went dark. I awoke in my room. It was nighttime. Did I have a dream? I questioned. I went to the door but I was locked in. This didn't feel like my room. Outside was pitch black and the window couldn't budge. While being an exact replica of my room, it felt otherworldly. I was covered in bandages and my shoulder ached with pain. My mind raced back to the car crash. It felt so real. I'm sitting here now in this fake room of mine, typing away. I don't know how long I'll be here. It's been a few hours and nothing so far. Hope this entry makes it out to you guys. Will update when I can. The night dragged on, not seeming to move as I stared out the window at some phony movie set. The room smelt like cheap plastic, like the 99-cent version of my real room. It scared me that they knew so much about my life. While I pondered on where my life has taken me till this point, my mind racing back to the blank, hellish faces of the nightwalkers. A low hum was emitting from the walls around my room. I pressed my ears against the wall, feeling a slight tingle through my body. As I pressed harder into the wall, I caught the faintest sound of talking. My TV across the room flickered on. The loud sound of static made me jump. I turned towards the TV, which lit up the dark room with a light blue fluorescent light as it struggled for a connection. When the TV caught a signal, a woman appeared on the screen. "Well, Henry, you've made it this far. I have to say I am slightly impressed," the woman spoke, taking a long draw from a cigarette. "See, can you hear me?" I questioned. The woman leaned closer to the camera. "Yes, we can, Henry. Let me tell you. You've been a great deal of joy for us. But your time with us is winding down. You have two choices, Henry. We cannot let you leave us knowing all that you know about us. With that, I am going to present with you two options." "Okay, go ahead." That nervous tickle in my throat started to form. Option number 1. I'm sure you are very familiar with what we call the void. You were there for some time, I'd say on Earth hours, approximately a week. My mind flooded with images of the vast dead grass plains that I walked aimlessly. "Yes, I am," I retorted. "Well, good. That is option 1. You will be brought there. You will not age and you will not die. I am essentially offering you immortality. Think of it as you are behind the looking glass to reality. Time moves differently when you are there." My mind already going 100 miles a minute. And option 2? Option 2 is you join us, Henry. So far you have been our longest lasting security guard. You've seen some pretty marvelous things within our little cemetery. We need someone now to oversee the new cattle that comes in. "Cattle? What do you mean, cattle?" I asked, leaning closer to the screen. We were nearly nose to nose. "We need people like you, Henry, to join us or to feed us. The elders need to feed. That's what makes this world keep on spinning." The woman dragged long on her cigarette till it was a twisty little ash. "I have no clue, lady. Why the hell would I want to join you?" My voice raising. "You don't have to, darling. You have another option," the woman snorted. "Well, fuck that. You just said I'll be cattle for you and whoever the fuck to be fed to," I screamed. The woman rose from her chair and walked off camera, leaving an empty room. I stood in the room huffing and puffing, my head feeling heavy. The lights in the room turned on, blaring me in the eyes. A voice from a speaker somewhere in the room resonated. "Pick Henry, you have two options," the woman thundered. "I don't know," I cried, falling to the floor weeping. The light getting ever so brighter, blinding me. Thoughts of my family and my old life came rushing back to me. "Pick Henry or we will decide for you," the woman roared. I tried to make some sense of what was going on. Maybe I could find a way to destroy them. But I would need to be inside with them, I thought to myself. The speaker crashed on. The woman spoke, "We are waiting." Okay, I have decided. I will join you, whatever the hell you is," I bawled. "Very good, Henry. Wait for further instruction and someone will be with you shortly. I suggest getting situated in your new room," the speaker hummed off. I crashed onto the bed, tears racing down my face while my mind raced. I couldn't go back to the void, I'd lose my mind in there. Maybe there is some way I can figure more of this out, but I need to be in this reality to do it. As I laid on my bed while began to overtake me, I slept soundly till being woken by the sounds of birds chirping. I looked out from my window, seeing the bright rays of sunlight peeking out from the horizon. Except I wasn't looking out of my apartment window. I was looking out into the cemetery where graves stood scattered amongst the fields of brush and foliage. I stumbled backwards in a panic, screaming out to the woman's voice hoping she'd answer me. Why am I back here? What's going on?" I wailed. The room went bright white again, blinding my eyes, searing into them. As I crumbled to the floor, I tried to fight against the searing white-hot light. Then, nothing. Like an instant flash, I opened my eyes and was met by the glaring metal of my wrecked car. I tried to stand up but my body ached in pain. Blood was racing down my forehead. My car laid in a mangled, totaled mess. I stumbled to my feet, using the car to help me up. Glass cracked as I struggled to get my footing. The sun was high in the sky that day, yet a neutral, comfortable temperature laid about. I looked around as the panic and dread set in deep within my stomach. An empty field lay before me with soft overgrown yellowish grass. I stepped forward, nearly falling over as my legs struggled to keep balance. I turned around to grab my car and it was gone. Soft, dead grass lay in its place. My mind went heavy as the tears bubbled in my eyes. I walked on that day aimlessly, walking for what felt like days as the sun never moved. I eventually stumbled upon a lowly hut sitting far out in the distance. My mind felt like mush as I pushed ahead. After some time, I reached the oh-so-familiar hut. I let myself in and on the desk sat a tiny cube screen TV. Curious, I switched it on and it played what looked like a live feed from a camera. The camera showed nighttime footage facing the hut, yet it wasn't me in the hut. I knew who was sitting there. It was a pimply-faced teen who looked terrified as he stared out into the darkness of the cemetery. I watched on indefinitely, watching his every move. I tried messing with the other buttons, which were lined 10 long of various different colors. I pressed the yellow button and stared on. Clang, something hit the glass on the hut on the live feed. The teen jolted his head up, looking around anxiously. What the hell, I thought. I pressed the yellow button again. Another clang as a tiny pebble crashed into the glass. The teen dove under the table, rummaging for something. I pressed the button again and again, getting a little thrill each time. Clang, 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 more and more pebbles hit the glass. The teen let out a pathetic little scream. He struggled under the desk, sitting there in the darkness. Smart, I thought. I leaned back in my chair, gazing upon the power that I controlled before me. I let the teen get comfortable, thinking he beat it this time. That's when I pressed the yellow, blue, red, and green button all at once. While I sat there comfortably chuckling to myself, the horrors of the cemetery pounced upon the teen. His terror-filled screams radiating through the tiny TV speaker. I gazed upon his death and saw the woman with red hair appear from the darkness. She looked directly at the camera from a distance, gave a wink and walked off to retrieve his body. The sun was high that day, as it was each day going forward. Hard to tell what a day is in this place since it was never nighttime. During my time here, I've watched countless of new security guards come in. It gets pretty fun trying to come up with new ways to fuck with them, to scare them, to see if they can keep up with all the rules. Death after death they came and went. I am following one girl right now. She's getting pretty far ahead in this little game. She's almost made it to where I made it last time. I hate to say it but I feel kind of proud of her.